Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Mike B, and today we're going to be looking at a really cool piece of my original First World War collection. So today we've got a US model 1917 service coat. This is what we call the rough cut variant. I'll get to that in a second, but it's a pretty cool piece of history, and it's a very personal piece of history for me. I really was looking for something that had a few of these features that I'll get to in a second. And this is pretty much my holy grail for World War I collecting. So we'll start off by just noting the color of the wool and the weave. It's very rough. It's not as smooth as some other countries. This is typical for American Model 1917 service coats. The wool quality standards kind of went down the crapper when we got involved, and we needed to go from about 200,000 men in our standing army to over 4 million. So a lot of the wool that otherwise wouldn't have been allowed to be used and wouldn't have been authorized to wear was now put into service, including stuff of this variant. So you can see here that we've got the Great Seal buttons, which was very common, and actually we still use a variant of these today on the dress uniform. It's just a little bit different design, but it's the same overall idea. Now, what I'll get to is how to identify certain insignias on an original service coat, so you can kind of know what you're looking for if you see one at an antique shop or a auction or something like that. But this one's very personal for me. For those of you that didn't know, I was in the National Guard. Yeah, I know you guys can make fun of me all you want. But anyway, I was in the 32nd Brigade Combat Team, which used to be the 32nd Infantry Division, which originally was the 32nd Division in the First World War. You can see the red arrow right there. If you don't know the history behind that unit patch, pretty much the 32nd Division was the only division to break through the Hindenburg Line at first, and it also broke through every single line it was ever faced up against. So they decided to make this an arrow because that's what they look like on the maps, and the line through there is the Hindenburg line, because that was the hardest one they broke through. And a lot of other units tried to do it and failed, and the 32nd took a lot of casualties, but they broke through, and that was their legacy, and they still use that unit patch today, to be honest. This one is a handmade variant. Most patches that you're going to see in the First World War on service coats are going to be handmade. Get the light up here a little bit more. This one is no exception. A lot of them would have been made in little French tailor shops, so they would have been a little bit better quality. This guy just literally cut a piece of red felt out and then quilt stitched, as you can see. So he knew what he was doing. It's a very hard stitch to do, and very time consuming, but that thing is not coming off. Quilt stitched that patch onto there. So that's pretty interesting. Up here we go to the collar discs, and the reason this is so insanely cool for me is because the unit I portray for reenacting is Bravo or Company B of the 128th Infantry Regiment, which is what I was actually in when I was in the military. Now, to find a collar disc that's got your exact company and regiment on it is very rare. It's hard enough to find your regiment, but the specific company is pretty rare because they actually got these custom made. These were not issued by the military. These were custom made, probably by some jeweler down in Waco, Texas, or around there. When they were at Camp MacArthur, got paid to take the standard infantry discs or an infantry B disc, which was also issued, and then put the 128 numbers on there, which is pretty cool. That was a 1 in a million shot, and I had to buy this. This thing, cost did not matter. This was mine. So on the right side of the collar, you've got the generic US disc, which is pretty cool. That's pretty standard. It doesn't say National Army or National Guard, which is kind of cool, considering that they've got such a personalized color disc on here, but they just have the generic US disc. But that didn't deter me at all one bit, because now I have something that's basically the holy grail and super rare and really hard to get. And now it's mine. So a big shout out to my friend Chris, you know who you are, for pointing this out and saying, hey, guess what? It's up on an auction site. So without him, I wouldn't have even seen it. So thanks, buddy. All right, so now we'll get to the rank. And you can see, obviously, we get into this little debate about the different shades of wool that were used. So there are uniforms made out of this color wool. There are uniforms made out of this color wool. This one's really brown. It's pretty dark. This one's like olive drab, kind of what people think is the correct shade. This just right here is an example of the million different shades that were used. This is no exception for any military of that time, even until today. All right, when I was in, we'd get ACUs that were very dark on the top and lighter on the bottom. Computerized dialots and everything, modern today's age, different factory, different manufacturer, different shades. So No exception here. And this is all original. Again, you can see that really nice, ornate, tedious quilt stitching that this guy did, or paid somebody to do, but might have done it himself. And that little chef's hat you see under there indicates that they're mess, which in World War I was not any job to be taken lightly. These guys were up with the guys, with the troops, and they tried to ensure that the Americans got hot chow at every given opportunity. That was one thing that set our troops apart from the just beaten, worn down European troops at that time, is they were mostly living on canned goods and just disgusting, scraps of whatever they could find or forage locally. Whereas the Americans and their mess corps, pretty much, I'll call it, I don't know if that's the correct term, they foraged food, but they also made meals that were really good, really nutritious, and hot. And they'd bring their mess kitchens up to within about 100 to 200 yards of the front line, and the soldiers would rotate off the line and go get their chow. So this guy would have been like the supervisor. It's the equivalent today of like an E7 position, all right? That would be overlooking all the junior cooks that would actually be cooking the food, foraging, setting up the stuff, and whatever. This is just a supervisory position. Nevertheless, there's only one of them per company, so I've got it narrowed down to 2 names, trying to figure some stuff out. I won't go into the details of the exact kind of details that are involved with my little search, because it'll probably bore you. But anyway, I'm trying to figure out who this belonged to. There's no name. Now, what we mean by rough cut is you can see in there's absolutely no liner, right? You can see in here it's just straight up wool. It's no exception either, because these actually came, I'll get to these stripes in a second, promise. These actually came just straight up unhemmed and see, that's hand sewing right there. They just came rough like that. So the soldiers would have to hem them to a certain length because they got sick of trying to crank out specific sleeve sizes. So they made them long, so worst case they had to hem them or whatever. Uniforms were issued so frequently for the American soldiers in the First World War. A lot of times, even if they were using the same uniform that they had used before they got off the line, it'd be thrown into a big laundry heap. And if you didn't have insignia, which most of them didn't, this is a post-armistice thing, by the way, maybe they would have worn rank. But these stripes right here, which we'll get to in a second, are post-war, and the unit patch is not post-war, but post-armistice. So they would have had uniforms a lot of time that didn't fit them perfect. You go to your company tailor if you could, but obviously this was done post-armistice, but that just goes to show you that these uniforms were issued and just kind of really not the best because you had to hem them yourself. That's not a factory job. So that's what they mean by rough cut. It was just done to save time on production and whatnot. All right, so we'll finally get to these. These are on the right sleeve, right underneath the rank. One rank chevron was worn because of the lack of supplies again. Each NCO was issued 1 pair of rank chevrons. Usually they'd wear 2 pre-war, but because there was such a short supply, each NCO was issued 1 pair, one for the overcoat and one for the service coat, which is this. All right, so below those, you've got what are called wound chevrons, all right? The Purple Heart did not exist as an award for a wounded person in the First World War. So each time they were exposed to gas or took enemy fire and were wounded as a direct result of enemy fire, like shrapnel, shell fragments, bullets, you name it, bayonet wounds, stab wounds, anything that would really qualify you for the Purple Heart, besides the gas thing, which later became an issue when they went to go convert these to a Purple Heart if they were still in the military. But that was what qualified you for a wound chevron. When I was telling you about the fact the mess staff and the mess corps were actually up with the guys, this guy has 2 wound chevrons, okay? They were probably originally gold bullion, but 100 years has worn them down a little bit. 2 wound chevrons. Now, this stripe on this side is just an overseas service stripe. This would have been gold originally too, but it's very worn. Gold was for 6 months to a year. So between 6 months and a year, every 6 months one of these was given. The blue overseas service chevron, which you can see on other things, was under 6 months, but you still were deployed over there in the combat, or in the time of combat, and I think the armistice counted. So this guy was only there for between 6 and 12 months, and was wounded 2 times. So do the math. As a mess sergeant, that's pretty insane. This is a pretty cool story, right? So this guy's only got 1 overseas service chevron. A lot of times you'll see a red, looks like a private chevron. That's just a discharge chevron. It'd be the equivalent of like a ruptured duck in World War II. This one doesn't have it on there, so I don't know why that is. This is just fun. I love history because It's supposed to have a bunch of stuff and a bunch of features, and it doesn't, which is interesting. There's also a little hook that's added down here so it can be worn a little bit better, and you can see that's not factory done. That's actually just put on there. It looks like a collar hook that he just put on there to kind of make it so it didn't flop open as much, and they probably got it tailored and all that stuff, so very interesting. But I just figured I'd share a piece of original World War I militaria with you that I own, and tell you why it means a lot to me personally, because it's just a really cool piece, and I just love the example. You see the pockets are round there, square there. It's just so jacked up. But again, this is an original uniform. There's nothing that's been altered about this, and really glad to have it in the collection. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you're new to the channel and you really like this video, which I hope you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And then go to my Patreon. The link is in the description, and become a supporter on there. For just $1 a month, you get access to cool stuff like this video, which was posted before I posted it on YouTube for the public to see. This is posted quite a bit before that. So you guys get first access to videos like this, exclusive access to some videos that I don't even post on YouTube. And we do giveaways. It's very interactive, polls and stuff. It's very fun stuff. So go on there, check that out, become a supporter of the channel to be able to afford stuff like this and ballistic tests and other fun things that we do on the channel. I hope you like this. If you did, let me know. And I'll probably make more of my World War I collection. I usually, for World War I US, I collect 32nd Division. Hopefully 128th stuff, but if it doesn't have any regimental things on it, I will still collect it. So that's my forte. I can do this for every single service coat that I have if you guys want. I just like the fact that I'm able to zoom in and get the detail pretty accurately on this. Hopefully you learned something. If you got any questions and you want to ask or whatever, go to my Facebook page, Mike B. And if not, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on the next video.